This is Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review with your CFL Division Semifinal Playoff Preview. The playoffs in the Canadian Football League have arrived, and we are going to be breaking down both Division Semifinal games taking place this Sunday, November the 13th. We're looking forward to it. It should be a very, very good couple of games here taking place in the division semifinals. Let's begin with the East semifinal. The Edmonton Eskimos taking on the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And we've got a situation here where the Edmonton Eskimos from the West Division are crossing over to the eastern side of the playoff bracket to play the Hamilton Tiger Cats, with Edmonton being the fourth place team, a better record than the third place team in the East Division, the Toronto Argonauts, which allows Edmonton to cross over to the East and be in the East playoff bracket facing the Ticats here in the East semifinal. Edmonton 10-8, Hamilton 7-11 on the season, and I'll tell you what, I've seen some weird things happen in the CFL playoffs in years past. I've seen teams that are on a roll going into the playoffs, all of a sudden hit the playoffs and they have a bad game, one and done, they're out. And then I've seen teams, that are struggling and playing terrible football going into the playoffs just suddenly flip a switch when the playoffs arrive and play well. I don't put it past that being a possibility for this Hamilton Ticats team, but to me, I just don't see it. Ken Austin, the head coach, has done a very good job with this franchise over the years. You look at what they've done since he's been here. Grey Cup appearance in 2013, Grey Cup appearance in 2014, East Final last year. Always, they've won at least one playoff game every year that Ken Austin's been here. But he's in tough to win his first playoff game here this year. This is a Ticats team that has played horrible on both sides of the football down the stretch. The offensive line has been a disaster. Quarterbacks have been running for their life. It got so bad against Montreal in their home finale. Now, granted, it was a meaningless game for the Ticats, but Ken Austin yanked Zach Collaros out of the game after the first quarter because that offensive line was letting him take hit after hit after hit, and he said, that's enough of this shit. I'm taking Collaros out, keeping him healthy for the playoffs. And Jeff Matthews came in and finished the game for the Ticats. So the offensive line is not protected well enough at all. They've not been consistent enough allowing the ground attack with C.J. Gable. They've not been good opening up holes for that. And the defense, particularly in the secondary, has really been terrible since Courtney Stephen, their best cornerback, went down to injury several weeks ago. Since then, every quarterback's been able to throw the football against this Hamilton defense. It's a real concern going into this game with Mike Riley, the quarterback, who can throw the ball as well as anyone, to a tremendous group of receivers in Darrell Walker, Adarius Bowman, Chris Getzlaff. This Brandon Zylstra has stepped up and been another great option at receiver in recent games for Edmonton, whereas Hamilton's receiving corps is decimated with injuries. Luke Tasker gone, Andy Fantu's gone, Chad Owen's gone. That's arguably their three best receivers that aren't going to play in this game. They've had some bright moments from Terrence Tolliver. Junior Collins has stepped in and played well at receiver. But in terms of receiver depth, Edmonton with a huge edge there. And Edmonton's defense, which didn't play well earlier in the season, it is playing better as the season progressed. And really, their defensive line is a concern here, because the one thing that Edmonton does best is get some pressure up front from Armando Sewell, Odell Willis, Marcus Howard, all capable on that defensive line for Edmonton of wreaking havoc. And against a suspect, struggling Hamilton offensive line, that is a very real concern for the Ticats in this game. I'll tell you what, Edmonton, the West team on the road, yet they're a 2.5 point favorite. That tells you all you need to know. Edmonton came to Hamilton as for a little bit of a playoff preview a couple weeks ago during the regular season. They won that game here in Hamilton 29-26, although final score not as close. The game not as close, rather, as the final score would indicate. Hamilton got some late garbage points to make that game closer than it was. I'll tell you what, I never underestimate Ken Austin. He will have a coaching edge here, and that might be the only edge Hamilton has in this game. But Ken Austin, this is going to be, his 8th, 9th, 10th playoff game as a CFL head coach. For Jason Moss on the Edmonton sideline, it's his first game in the playoffs as a CFL head coach. Coaching experience edge for Hamilton, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough. We'll get back to this game for Play of the Week at the end of the video. The West semifinal, BC and Winnipeg. BC 4.5, 5-point favorite, total of 55 in this game. And I'll just put it this way. This is a very, very tough one for me to figure out because of the fact you look at the two meetings. I mean, 11-7, 12-6, two teams that are pretty close. But in the regular season meetings, we talk about two bizarre results. You could argue BC was the far better team in both games against Winnipeg in terms of moving the football, in terms of yards put up. I mean, you look at the numbers in those football games for BC when they played Winnipeg earlier this year. They outgained Winnipeg by 168 yards in the first meeting, but they lost 37-35. They outgained Winnipeg by 40 yards in the second meeting, but they also lost that game 35-32. I mean, BC moved the ball well against the Blue Bombers in both games. Jonathan Jennings played well, but what was the difference in both of those games? Turnovers. Really, that's all there is to it. I mean, you look at the turnover situation for BC in both of those games, 6 turnovers they had in the one game against BC or against Winnipeg where they lost 35-32. And then in the second meeting, fumbles and turnovers were another issue for this BC team. 2 more turnovers, -2 in turnover margin in the one game against Winnipeg. And look at in the second game, -4 in turnover margin. That was the difference. And that to me is a problem. When you turn the ball over in one game quite a bit against one opponent, maybe you can write it off and say, hey, we just didn't protect the football. But against the same Winnipeg team in both regular season games this year, the BC Lions couldn't hang on to the football. And it makes me think that maybe it is something Winnipeg is doing, whether it's, just pawing at the football or active hands trying to get the ball loose from BC, or reading the coverages maybe better than BC can figure it out. To me, when you turn the ball over that much in one game against an opponent, you can maybe write it off as an anomaly. But when it happens twice against the same team, that's a bit of a concern and a red flag for me. So, to me in this game, I definitely trust Jonathan Jennings a bit more than Matt Nichols. Matt Nichols did not necessarily play great down the stretch for Winnipeg, although he is the reason why they're in the playoffs, because when they benched Drew Willie and he took over, there was an automatic spark generated by him taking over at the quarterback position. But I still think Jennings has more mobility, a little bit more of a dual threat, can make things happen. I think BC has a better defensive front, get better pressure on opposing quarterbacks. The sack numbers for Winnipeg outside of Jabal Westerman are not great. I think the secondary for Winnipeg is good, and that's definitely where they have the edge defensively. They have a better secondary, I think, than BC, because BC's had injuries to Ronnie Yell, TJ Lee, and Stephen Clark in that secondary this season, which have really hurt the Lions' pass defense. But I don't know. To me, it's a tough one, because I firmly believe BC's the better team and is going to win this game. But we're talking about laying 4.5 and 5. They've got to win by a little bit of a margin here. Winnipeg did beat them in both games this season, but they were outgained, outstatted, outyarded heavily, and really won those games thanks to all those BC turnovers, which usually you chalk up to, like I say, just bad luck that day. But when it happens twice, you turn the ball over that many times. You turn the ball over, 8 times? 8 times against the same team in 2 games. Maybe that's something the Winnipeg defense is doing well against you. That is the concern here for the BC Lions as they take the field in this one. So I think BC wins. I'd lean to the Lions here. I still got to think long and hard. It's early in the week whether I want to lay 4.5 and 5. Not sure I'm comfortable with it. We did see 2 high-scoring games between these two teams in the regular season meetings. But again, a lot of those were turnovers, short fields. So can that happen again? We'll see. But very, very tough game for me to call in terms of the West semifinal. Winner of that game plays Calgary. I'll tell you what's not quite as tough a game to call. The one we're going to talk about for play of the week here for the division semifinal round. We're going back to the East semifinal, Edmonton and Hamilton. We're going to look at the better team, in my opinion, with the better record, the more stable defense, the more stable team in the trenches on both sides of the ball, and the team from the flat-out better division. The West was far superior to the East this season in the CFL, and I think it's going to prove to be that way once again this Sunday. Let's take the Edmonton Eskimos -2.5. That's rotation number 277. Edmonton -2.5 against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I don't underestimate Ken Austin. Respect the hell out of him, but I think too many injuries, Too much poor play down the stretch of the regular season is just going to be too much to overcome. I think the Hamilton Tiger Cats season is going to be over after this weekend. Let's take Edmonton -2.5, your CFL Division Semifinal Play of the Week. All right, that'll wrap it up. That's my look at the CFL Divisional Playoff Round. I'll be back next week. We'll look at the Division Finals as Ottawa in the East and Calgary in the West await the winners of the Division Semifinals this weekend. We'll talk about those games next week. Until then, I'm Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review. Enjoy the games and good luck.
Go to SBRodds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.